Welcome to the Emotional Horsemanship Podcast. I am your host, Lockie Phillips, and I help deeply caring equestrians create emotionally balanced horses with science, empathy, and feel. This podcast is a safe place for anyone who desires a better future for horses and for the equestrian lifestyle. I hope that you will enjoy these solo and collaborative episodes where we enjoy a deep insight into our horses' worlds and ways in which we can make that better for them. If you love horses and are willing to do right by them, you're going to love this podcast. And I thank you for being here. My guest on the podcast is Cat Ho Soo Lee. Cat Ho Soo Lee is a spiritual business mentor. She is the host of the Emotional Alchemy Podcast, of which I have happily visited at least twice as a guest speaker. I consider Cat both a colleague and a friend. Cat takes a trauma-informed lens to the practice of running our own businesses. She enfolds somatic, scientific, spiritual, and nervous system knowledge into a holistic mentoring role, guiding today's business owner to thrive in and enjoy running their own business. She's also a client who has taken lessons with me, which, to my delight, I discovered a self-professed beginner with horses to possess, strangely, an advanced skill set towards horses. Her work in the nervous system, in movement, in traditional Eastern medicine, and trauma-informed somatic practices naturally makes her a brilliant horsewoman. Cat lives in Washington State and has a ranch of her own, and in the spring of 2024, she showed up to my Washington State clinic and was a powerful and positive voice in that clinic space. Cat is the first of a series of podcasts where I will present people whom on the surface appear to be new to horses and yet possess skill, feel, understanding and knowledge that even lifelong horse people struggle with at times to embody. I present such guests here alongside industry figureheads such as Temple Grandin and Celeste Lazarus because it is never my opinion that only decades of experience can help you be excellent with a horse. Sometimes, from the mouths of beginners comes the ultimate feel of horse sense. Sometimes, from the mind of the fresh, we find logic. And horsemanship is not solely gate-kept by the uber-experienced, but can be embodied more immediately from a multidisciplinary approach. I hope you enjoy meeting Cat as much as I enjoy talking with her. Cat Lee, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I am doing so well today.
It's good to see you. I mean, I'll never not say this, I think, but it always feels hammy when we go to record a pod and we log on to the Zoom or whatever and everyone says hello to each other and then we hit record and then we have to say hello to each other again, but this time we're being recorded and everyone puts on their telemarketer voice. Right? And it's always interesting to see what masks people wear in their business. And I think that you are one of these people whom you are the same everywhere. You don't wear a mask. You are just you.
Mm-hmm.
So for those of us who don't know you, could you try and tell us who you are, what you do, and how you do it?
I think I just want to name that the presence that you hold, Lucky, actually makes me pause and think about this question.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just appreciating that in this moment of how people just say oh, how are you? And then you just say the fluffy thing that comes to mind. And I think because of who you are, there's zero fluff in your presence. And so it invites me to actually slow down and think about that. So I'm going to give a very, I guess, Taoist answer, which is identity doesn't fit into a box. And I don't know how to answer that question of who you are because it's just an always evolving thing. Um,
Mm.
so in this moment, uh, I am an aspiring homesteader. I
Mm.
just purchased 10 acres with my husband 4 months ago, and we were able to move 4 horses onto our property. And we're slowly and steadily starting a relationship with this land. So that's part of the thing that I do. Um, for work, I'm a spiritual business mentor and relationship coach. And to me, that just means that, as you were talking about masks, like how do we release a lot of these like conditions and masks that hold us back from the truest version of ourselves and allow that to flow through our relationships and through our business. And I really do think about business as being a relational practice.
Mm.
So um, yeah, that's the
Yeah.
easiest I can answer that.
Yeah. I start with this big ass question, not because we need to hear an accurate answer, though. If you get that, like, bravo. Very few people will be able to give an accurate answer to all three of those components off the bat in a nutshell. But the point is just to hear you talk. The same like how what I would approach a horse. I would like to start by taking their temperature and just understanding, hi, who are you? What do you do? And how do you do it? You know,
Mm-hmm.
and then some horses go, oh, I feel really uncomfortable that you're asking me who I am. And because maybe no one's ever asked them. And it's always interesting to discover what human beings are associated with such horses, because often, if you pose the same question to those human beings, they will have a similar response to their horses. They wear
Mm-hmm.
masks just like their horses do. It's a fascinating process to understand the relational field between humans and their horses. And I see you as someone extremely adept at doing that as a spiritual business mentor, but horses are an inspiration for you, you know. And you and I have had several conversations where we have woven business and horses effortlessly into a single coherent thread. At least I think it was coherent.
Well, I mean, it's been super fun to just get to know you more and to like to me it's really just there's no boundaries, right? So like the way that we approach any kind of relationship, whether it's relationship with our partner, our families, our businesses, and I'm kind of curious to ask, like, why did you invite me onto your podcast? Because I am brand new to horses. I've only been working with horses for about 4 years now, and in terms of horse stewardship and being a horse mama, I've only had 4 months under my belt.
Hmm.
And I look at your lineup and I'm like, Lori Halliday and, you know, like these people that I just really look up to, like Felicity Davies. And I'm just like, I haven't had a chance to listen to your podcast yet, but I've like flipped through the episodes and I'm like, what, why does Lucky want to have me on, you know?
Great question. I want you on the podcast because A, I like you. And maybe it would start and stop there. I want to talk to people that I like.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
That's it. I mean, it's really that simple. I want to hang out with my friends and I want to record what we talk about and what we share. I couldn't give a rat's ass if someone was the second coming of Ray Hunt, you know, and horses threw rose petals at their feet. And I couldn't give a shit if someone was raised with horses and was in the saddle when they were a potato in a diaper, or if they are brand new to horses. I
Mm-hmm.
believe that excellence in horseness, in horse sense, horsemanship, that kind of excellence is a psychological demographic first before it is anything else. And I've done a few lessons for you online. We'll see each other soon at a clinic, but you're not participating in that clinic, you'll be auditing. But we've had a couple of lessons online, and you've got some pretty touchy, messed up baby rescues.
Mm-hmm.
Babies,
Yeah.
babies. So these animals represent, at least from my experience in my business, the most troubled type of horse that one can envision. I have a lot of horses in my program that were your horses when they were young, and they're a few years older and they're messed up because no one stepped in. Do you remember what I said to you in our last lesson? I said twice or three times, you have a really good energy for working with your horses. Like, it's really what they require and what they need. I stand by that statement because you might say that you're new to horses and you're new to being a homesteader and all of this stuff. But you are doing, in my opinion, advanced colt starting with seemingly no prior practice. What the hell is that about? Because there are loads of trainers out there who've hung their shingle out who do a pretty spectacular job of spectacularly messing up horses left, right, and center.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think as you're saying that, the thing that the sort of like Venn diagram overlap of like both of our works is intuition. And to me, intuition always begins in the body. Like, I really do think about my body as being the communicator of like yeses and nos and what's okay and what's not okay. And I've had such a long practice. Yeah, I'm new to horses, but I've had such a long practice working with bodies. I was an acupuncturist before I was a coach, and now I'm reading people's bodies through a virtual screen most of the time. And I'm simultaneously regretful and also grateful that I got into horses late, because I've been multiple times, even just in my short journey, where something has felt viscerally wrong in my body, and I can't name exactly what it is, but I know that I need to hold a boundary for my horses. And I will never tolerate anybody coming into my space and working with my horses in a way that I think is going to be detrimental to them. And I attribute a lot of that to, yes, I don't know all the like ins and outs of classical training or traditional training, but I look at these animals and I'm like, oh, you're just a body. Like you have the same body that I have, and you feel the same things that I feel. And so then it's more about, how do I learn your language? Like, what does an ear flick mean? What is, you turning your hips towards me mean? All these like little subtle languages that is different from us being a bipedal creature and them being a four-legged creature. And how do I bridge that gap? And that's been so helpful doing lessons with you, because I think of you as like being the translator, and then I take those lessons and I'm like, oh, that means that I just got a little bit more vocabulary to like have a conversation with these guys,
And it's been really easy to teach you so far, because I will describe to you what to do and it's immediately translated and is present in your body. I don't say you're obedient to my commands. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that you're taking my directives and you're filtering them through the content of your character and allowing your talent to attach to the directives, and then immediately presenting it to the horse in something that looks a lot like advanced feel. This is my opinion. You can agree with me or not. And it depends what your relationship like is with a compliment. But there are people who I've taught who have spent their whole lives with horses who, and I say this with love and respect because I often laugh with them about it, not at them, with them about it. And, we work on it, and I seek to give them tools. But they're with their horses like these bouncy balls in a room, or like magnets with the ends flipped around. They just can't connect. It's just like these pieces of meat bouncing off each other, and it's just become this mechanical enterprise of action, action, action. And they've sold their field down the river long, long ago. But because of what you do for a living, because of what you've been through, and because of who you are, you're able to step into horses as an adult and from the beginning, access your gifts, train with feel, and help very troubled horses feel a whole lot better about themselves and colt start. I'm just letting you know that what you represent basically takes the mainstream status quo of horse training and presents it as potentially dead in the water, at least a lot of their tropes. And I'm all about that. I like to have my tongue in my cheek and a glint in my eye while I stand there and say, the emperor has no clothes. And in a way, you help me tell that story because here's one of the tropes, Kat. One of the tropes of horsemanship right now is that you have to suffer with 5,000 horses before anyone should be taking you seriously as a horse person. That's one of the tropes. It also sounds and looks like unless you've fallen off 100 times, you're not a real rider. Beside the fact that there's no insurance company that will cover you if that's your policy of training riders, it's egregious in my opinion. But there's this sort of relentless stoicism where it says you have to have 10,000 hours. You have to have hundreds or thousands of horses under your belt, tens of thousands of horses under your belt in order for us to take you seriously. I think it is beyond toxic, beyond outdated, and it's not the truth in my opinion, because I've worked with beginners who from the beginning are showing gifts with their horses. And if all you do is just give them tools and they go, great, and they're doing great work from the beginning, and you just keep throwing horses at them and they keep doing well with them. No matter how many you throw at them, whether they take 1 or 1,000, you keep throwing horses at these people and they keep doing well. So if we need our 10,000 hours, how many people out there are suffering right now in lesson programs and training programs with a coach who's screaming at them that they have to continue suffering in order to get good at this? And here you are, and here to a certain extent I am. We just wandered in, aliens, picked up a horse and said, cheers. And we wandered back out into the woods again. And we just had a great time with our horses and we're doing well.
Yeah. I think this is the difference between behaviorism and I really think about what you do as being emotional alchemy. And that's how I define my work as well, is instead of looking at a behavior and saying, oh, I should fix that, or that should be changed, or that should be different, how can we make an emotional attunement to that behavior and understand where that behavior is coming from? Perhaps it's rooted in trauma, perhaps it's rooted in conditioning, perhaps it's rooted in whatever it is, and really shift it from the bottom up. If I can share a story,
please.
So you've met Koko virtually. He is, if anyone were to meet him, he's incredibly pushy. He's just turned a year old. I want to use all these words in quotation marks because this is not how I look at him. Pushy, bossy, invasive, intrusive. I think any other trainer would look at him. Actually, I've had multiple trainers who have given me suggestions around him in terms of you have to put him in a round pen and run him until he is tired. You have to get him off of you. You have to lunge him, do all these things to him that pushes him away from my body.
They can keep doing that, and I will continue picking up the pieces with those horses 5, 10, 15 years later, because that's what I do, right? I pick up the pieces of those burned out, broken horses. Anyway, continue your story.
I even had a trainer who was working out of my barn up until fairly recently, and I had to ask her to leave for several reasons. But one of the reasons is because she told me, oh, he nipped me while I was giving a lesson and I smacked his face. And that is absolutely not okay, in my opinion. It does not matter. I mean, it's just, I cannot imagine taking this little baby horse and he is out of curiosity, perhaps I read it as insecurity, coming in and trying to figure his body out. Like, that's how I look at it. It's like he's trying to figure his body out. His backstory is that he was abandoned when he was 2 days old, orphaned. there's horrific practices that happen with wild horses here in the States, and he is unfortunately a byproduct of that. He was rescued and then adopted out. This is the short version of his story. Adopted out, and then somebody starved him. And so before he got to me, which I got to him, he got to move here at 8 months old. All this happened before 4 months old. He's lost two mothers, essentially. I'm his third mother. And I really do think that he looks at me with this like, hey, like mommy, mommy, mommy energy, which is the pushiness, which is the bossiness, which is the like, will you look at me energy? And I had a moment. I also learned from, you're a friend of hers as well, Shannon Bean. She's a dear friend of
She was on the pod, and it was a barn burner conversation. Absolutely fantastic. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I absolutely adore Shannon, and one of the things that she suggested was like, can you two exist in the same space without him being on top of you? And the answer prior to this week was no. That was not safe for him. He did not feel safe unless he was touching me, pulling on my clothes, nipping at me. And I've been asking him this question for weeks now. Can we exist in the same space? And I hear him when he says, no, I can't do that yet. And there was one day when I finished up all my chores, he's always the last one to walk me out the gate. And it was different this day. Like, we had spent a lot of time connected. I had groomed him. His like coat was gleaming. I was just like in awe of this, like, he's lost his like winter woolies. And I'm just like, oh, you're so yummy. I love you so much. And as I'm walking out, he stops in the middle of the arena and just stands there. And I took that as him finally answering that question of like, yes, I can be in the same space as you and not be on top of you. So I answered back, and I sat on the ground about 12 feet away from him, and I just sat there with him. And in my mind, I'm just like the sun is going down. The sun is like just like hitting his coat like perfectly. It's like he's a mud pony, and it's like the first time I've seen him without like mud all over him. And I'm just like in awe of this creature. And this is something that I'm slowly coming out of the closet about, but I have always had animals communicate to me. I've been resistant to hearing it. And I asked him, hey, is there anything that you need to understand about? Is there anything that you need me to understand about you? And animals send me pictures. And he sent me a picture of him thrashing in water. And in that moment, I understood one of the ways that they catch wild horses here is they set up a water trap. And so they put up fencing around a source of water. And then when the herd goes in to drink, they close it up and then they gather the adults. And then the babies get just beat the crap up. And I just felt this sense of terror that he felt in that moment. And he thought he was going to die.
Wow.
And so I just sat there with him and I just breathed that in with him and was like, I get it, buddy. Like, that was really scary. And the big trauma of that moment is that you actually lost your mom. You know?
And
like,
everyone else. And everyone else.
And everyone else. Exactly. The second picture he sent me, because I asked him again, hey, what else do you need me to understand about you, is a picture from his perspective and him walking up to a water trough and there being nothing there and pawing at the water trough. And that's what happened at his the first home that he was adopted out to, is that woman starved him and he had to be repossessed by the rescue and come back into rescue. And that's how I met him. And continuing to hold space. This is all happening from 12 feet away, which is the safe place for both of us. And then he sent me a third picture of me leaving. He and I had this like instant connection when I met him in rescue. Like he did this like funny little, like I scratched his neck and he did this funny little like giraffe neck thing. And the woman who runs the rescue was like, I've never seen him do that before. Like that is a very strange face he's making. And it was just this like magnetic connection from the beginning. And so before we had the property, I went to go visit him multiple times. I think I saw him like 3 or 4 times. We walked in a parade together. Like he like was just such a wonderful little horse that I like could not stay away from him, even though he was 3 hours away from where I live. And so I went to go visit him multiple times, and he sent me a picture of me leaving one of those times. And it clicked into me that it was really confusing for him that I kept coming and going, coming and going, coming and going. And so him being on top of me comes from an insecurity of, are you actually going to stay here with me? And so I sat with him and I was like, you are never not going to meet my baby. I will never sell him. The only way he's getting another home is if I die before he does. And even then I'm like trying to figure out, okay, so I need to set stuff up for my horses to like, if something happens to me.
Yes. Yes. Is everyone listening to that? Everyone who owns horses, if we own horses, we need to have a contingency plan set up for them in writing, in a will or similar. At least a handshake agreement with a very close friend that you trust to step in and to shelter your horses, and an emergency fund to cover their expenses for 9 to 12 months while all of this is arranged. God forbid something were to happen to us. All of us need to do exactly what Kat just said. Yes, but please continue. Please continue your story.
So to me, the feeling of enmeshment comes when, and I'll use just Koko as an example, but I think you can apply this to all humans. The feeling of enmeshment comes in when one body comes into another body and says, can I be here? And that other body says, no, this doesn't feel safe and I need to leave. And so that was the tension between Koko and I, is like, he's 400 pounds now. He's like turning into a big boy, And so him being in my space didn't feel safe to my body. And so I would exit my body when he would come in. Even though I'm physically there, he senses that I'm not there,
which reinforces the push because he's trying to find you.
Exactly.
Right.
And so I'm noticing how sensitive he is. Because if I come in and I have an audiobook on and I'm thinking about other shit, he is right on top of me again. If I come into the arena and I'm there and I'm like, hi, babies, I'm here with you, he is the most well-behaved horse ever.
Yeah.
He's playful.
It's just
He's
glorious.
He's still mischievous. He pulls the gloves out of my pockets. Like, that's never going to go away. But I don't get the like mommy, mommy, mommy energy. And I think that this is where the behaviorism and the emotionality is so important, is if I were to try to fix the behavior without addressing the emotional root to it, this is where you get those horses 5 to 10 years from now. Because now we've reinforced the trauma.
Right. I mean, you've just given us a masterclass in the equine nervous system. You've just given us an insight into why, as a self-professed beginner with horses, you are showing advanced feel and handling capabilities and an immediate ability to integrate directives that make sense to you into effective practices with your horses. You've just answered everyone's question. How does Lockie think that Cat is like that? Well, you've just answered everybody's question, because what you've just described is you're speaking my language. You're speaking my language. And it's so important that people start to really, really onboard this awareness for themselves around their horses. The fact that whether people are skeptical or not about animal communication is beside the point. What happened is that you had an awareness and an observation and a thought and a feeling about your horse in real time while you were with your horses. And you were able to recognize that, harness that, utilize that in real time, and get a change and a result. I mean, some of the stuff that comes into my head when I'm working and riding my horses makes me think I'm crazy. I gaslight myself for some of the things that happen to me with horses. And I say, no, I don't know if this can be true. I mean, but if we open ourselves up to it, we've just begun to scratch the surface. You are for me an example and an inspiration perhaps for other people who might be listening, who might be coming to horses as adults and walking into the equestrian service sector if they're not aware of their nervous system, if they're not fully rooted in their spiritual practice, if they don't have a sense of themselves, which you do, right? If someone who's an adult and a beginner walks into the equestrian service sector and they don't have that sense of themselves, oh boy, someone throw them a life raft, because they're about to get chewed up. They're about to get chewed up by their trainer, by their farrier, by their vet, by their feed supplier, by their tack shop, by their instructor, by the breeder, by the trader, by the livery manager. They're about to get chewed up by everyone, because almost every voice that they will come up against will have, in varying degrees of severity, the overt and subliminal messaging that you don't know what you're doing.
Yep.
Shut up. Listen to me. I'm the haves. You're the haves not. You are the have nots. You don't know what you're doing. This is the storyline of all adult beginners around horses. And you are a testament to that just not being true. There's the nuts and bolts of gaining some skills so you can support your horses, but you've got Shannon, who, if I could throw my money at any instructor for myself on planet Earth, it would be Shannon. And it's no joke. It's not the first time I've said that. And you've decided to work with me. I don't know how helpful I can be compared to Shannon, but it's beautiful to hear you say this. I mean, just today I was riding my horse, Soreño, who has just started turning a corner with me in relation. He has started to go deeper with me and realize that I'm not just some wacky hippie doing weird stuff anymore, that I've got some things that he's benefiting from, almost in spite of himself. He's discovered a benefit to a few of the things I've shown him. And when I'm riding him, he doesn't take his eye off me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm on his back, but he's got an eye on me. He's watching and he's taking notes about everything that I'm doing. And today he showed off for me. Today, I was like, okay, and I put some aids on, aids that he probably knows from a previous life. But the way they might have been asked in a different life from a relational field, I think will have been different to the relational field he and I are sharing right now. And I put some of those aids on, and he said, hold my beer. And he did them. And he put extra effort into them. And I started to laugh because I could feel him saying, look at this. Just watch me. look at this. Are you watching? Are you watching what I'm doing here? And he did it. And I started to laugh and I pet his neck and he threw his head down out of the reins and he shook his head and he snorted. And I was like, yeah, you're so clever. He's like, I know, darling. He says, stay on board, will you? What else are we doing today? It was just, you know, and a lot of people have numbed themselves
Mhm.
to having this with their horses because they're afraid of being anthropomorphic, because we're still living through this extremely perverse, narrow, short interlude in human science of 1950s behaviorism, which really was just a flash in the pan and then it was over. And yet there's these weird tendrils of it in horsemanship now.
Yeah.
You know?
I think one of the things that one of the biggest lessons that I've learned about working with horses is from Shannon. I've had she and I are personal friends as well, and so I've gone and visited her and her herd out on Vancouver Island, stayed with them for I think the most I've stayed out there is a week. And she had this beautiful horse, Fauna.
I remember her.
And Fauna also has a trauma story. And I'm not going to speak into that trauma story because it's not my story to tell. But I watched Shannon working with Fauna, and Fauna is this. She still sometimes talks to me, Fauna.
Fauna has passed away, by the way. Yeah, for anyone who's listening, Fauna was Shannon's horse who tragically passed away. Yeah.
But I watched her this one afternoon where she was working with Fauna, and Fauna is just this like spitfire of a dragon. She's a small horse and she's kicking and running around and having the best time. And previous to observing Shannon's approach, I had only worked with trainers who would have punished that behavior. And I'm looking at them and I see Fauna watching Shannon. So she's not doing it in a dangerous way.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked her about that afterwards, after watching her in the round pen. And Shannon was like, I want my horses to talk to me.
Mm-hmm.
I want my horses to communicate with me. If something feels uncomfortable or something doesn't feel right, I want them to be able to tell me. And sometimes that language is not going to be subtle, depending on the horse. And so to me, it's less about how do we make that horse trained, safe, kid safe, husband safe, all these words that we throw around. And I'm pretty sure she's said this in some sort of post or I don't know, in conversation. So this is a Shannonism. I'm gonna attribute that to the Shannonism. Is like, no, let's work on becoming safer for our horses.
Yep.
The other way around.
Right.
Because we as humans think safety means, you override your nervous system. Hey, horse, you have to override your nervous system.
You have to give me what I ask you to give me, when I ask you to give me, how I ask you to give me. Exactly when I ask it, immediately you have to jump off my request into the response. Yes. Mm-hmm.
And what I've learned from both of you is that the timing of a conversation between human and horse is so much slower than my human brain wants it to be.
Right. Right. Right.
And sometimes feels offensive.
Oh, can I stay with you right there on that? That is such a juicy little piece.
Play with it. Play with it.
Okay. Talking with you is always like we're instrumentalists and we're doing like a jazz improvisation. That's how it's always felt, working, chatting with you and collaborating with you. But yeah, so I deliver the services at the moment between 55, 65 people per week, every week, and have done since January. Prior to that, it was about 30 per week. So I'm sort of playing around with this sort of scale. So it's a mixture of group and private services, but only 1/3 of that is a group. So it's still a pretty high volume. So even though got this little farm and people drive past all day and it looks like nothing much is going on. Imagine that I'm a high volume lesson operation, right? And so this revolving door, mostly return clients. It's very unusual for people to actually get an inch in my, like a foot in my door at the moment. It's mostly returning clients. Again and again and again and again, there's this piece that comes up in horse people all over the world, and it's identical everywhere. We've all subscribed to it, and it's all in our bodies. Where does it come from? Where we ask the horse to do something, and we ask in a simple, precise way. And then we wait. And then I'm watching the horse as a horse translator. I'm watching the horse. The horse goes, they asked the thing. And then the horse starts processing. The horse starts processing the request. And the processing takes time because they have a limited prefrontal cortex and they haven't subscribed to this late stage capitalist hellscape. So they're not on a time crunch. Time is not money to them. So they have not forgotten what it's like to think long thoughts, and they don't have these little hypodermic needles of dopamine smartphones. So they haven't had their dopamine profiles completely fried. Most of them, some horses have if they've trained in a certain way. However, I digress. So these horses start thinking through the request. 1 second passes, 2 seconds pass, 3 seconds pass. The human gets anxious. They start to panic. They start to shame spiral. I've done something wrong. I didn't ask correctly. Or they externalize, they make it the horse's fault. They make the horse wrong. So they come at them with force or with an escalation. Or they take all of that and it becomes more insidious. It transmutes immediately into something very elegant. And they go tap, 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 tap to get what they want quicker, right now. Give me that what I want right now. Don't leave me hanging. Latency is seen as some sort of evil. Meanwhile, I'm watching the horse and the horse was just processing the request. And then the human goes, don't process, just do. And the horse goes, what? And they go, give it to me. And the horse goes, oh, shit. And they throw a behavior at them. And then the person says, good horse, and gives them a cookie and scratches them on the neck. And the horse is like, oh, whoa, man. Whoa,
That was intense.
man. Whoa, man. The monkeys are not okay. The monkeys are not okay. And you see them, they go back into their fields after lessons. They almost walk up to their buddy and go, oh, the monkeys are not okay. They are not okay. And it's true, we're not okay. Most of us are not. And so on live lessons, it's a super interesting exercise because I'm watching the seconds tick by on the recording. And I'll have them ask. And when they start to go somewhere with it, I say, just stay with it. If the horse hasn't heard you, you can repeat. But don't yell it at them when you repeat. Just say it again, like you've asked a question of a friend and they didn't hear you the first time. Just say it again, right? And they go, that's okay that I'm not nagging. It's like, no, you're just communicating. You're just talking. And then don't panic, just stay. The longest it's ever taken was about 40 something seconds. The average latency period for most horses to process, in my opinion, is somewhere between 6 to 12 seconds. This is the latency we're talking about. This is the timing that causes people to completely spiral off into the deep end. Meanwhile, once the horse gives the behavior that we've asked them to do, and they usually give it with a lot of quality when you give them that time, they give it with a lot of excellence. The person goes, oh, like they didn't know that they could be patient and they could still get results. And they go, whoa. And I go, okay, so that was 12 seconds. In the grand scheme of things, is 12 seconds a lot of time? And I am being facetious when I say that because we have to laugh about this, you know? And they say, no, 12 seconds isn't a lot of time. I say, okay, great. So you're allowed to be patient and it still will give you results. It's always beautiful to help people embody that and understand that, because so many people, like what you just said, are deeply offended when they don't get what they want right away. You touch on a very, very raw nerve when we start talking about this stuff, because a lot of people have a sullen teenager, wounded, sullen teenager deep inside of themselves that had something taken away from them, and they are exercising this issue out on their horses.
Yeah. Well, as you're saying all this, it's reminding me of my own upbringing. Because I am the daughter of Korean immigrants. We've talked a little bit about that on my podcast, but my role in the family was translator. My parents did not speak English very well,
Ooh,
and my
that's a
brother
burden.
and my brother did not speak Korean very well, whereas I was fluent in both. And so I just saw so many instances of drama and miscommunication and misunderstandings happening just because, like, my parents and my brother were asking questions that needed time to integrate and to be understood, because we're working with two different languages, and we're also working with two different meanings of a word sometimes. And something that my dad always used to say is, like, his biggest pet peeve speaking to English speakers was, like, when people feel like he doesn't understand, they just say the thing faster and louder.
That's America, baby. That is America. That is America. UH hyphen America. America. That is America right there. Love you, mean it. I love you all. I love America. It's a beautiful place, beautiful country. Where would we be without you guys? But honestly, that's it right there.
And he was like, I'm not stupid. I just need the question slower, or I need it told or asked differently. And so to me, like, that's one of the fundamental things that I think about in any kind of communication, human or horse, where it's not completely reliant on that other person to understand me. Like, I have to do my part in being understood as well.
This is why you're good with horses. This is one of the reasons why you're good with horses, because, 100%. I mean, you and I have a similar, well, at least a Venn diagram overlap here, because though I was raised in Australia and everyone spoke the same and whatever, as soon as I could, I bounced to Europe and found myself immediately in a multicultural house. I was in a boarding house for 2 years with people from all over the world, kids from all over the world. We had a Turkish girl who was a friend of ours who spoke no English when she arrived, and she learned English from my friend Laura, who was from Spain, and English was her second language, but she spoke English with her mother was Scottish. She spoke English with a Scottish Spanish accent, and then a pure Mallorquin Spanish. And then she was talking with Johnson, who's Turkish, with a Spanish, Scottish, English. And then Johnson started picking up English with a Spanish, Scottish. It was just like hodgepodge, And there I was thinking, wow, when we're raised in an environment where everyone speaks like us and we don't get that exposure, we forget what real communication is actually about. I mean, when I landed in Poland, my company, I was one of 2 people in my company who had English as their first language. And the other of the 2 was from the Royal Ballet School in London. Very, very, she grew up at White Lodge in London, and she was very of the upper crust. And there I was, just this heathen from Australia. And so we barely spoke the same language. I had more in common with my Russian colleagues who spoke no English. We had more understanding with each other because they didn't speak English, I didn't speak Russian, but we understood each other because I watched them move, and we could use body language and expression and touch and feeling with each other. The first time I ever understood Polish spoken to me, first person who ever spoke to me in Polish and I understood exactly what they were saying, was the neighbor of my training stable where I studied everything originally with horses. She was the neighbor. She was the cook. She was the cleaner. Also, I've got 2 cats from her farmhouse. We got our cats from her. Her name was Anya. When Anya spoke, she was just a woman in Rudnitsky, which is a tiny little hamlet with 5 houses in the middle of Poland, in the middle of nowhere, one of hundreds of thousands of hamlets of the same. When Anna spoke Polish, she only said something if she fully embodied what she had to say, if she really meant it and felt it. And when she said it with a lot of expression, and there was zero ulterior motive in what she had to say. She also wasn't mechanical when she spoke. She embodied what she had to say. She felt it. There was expression with what she had to say. And it was the first time someone ever spoke at me in Polish and I understood it, everything. And I would reply to her in English and she would go, mm-hmm. And then she would rabbit at me in Polish and I'd go, uh-huh. And we'd understand each other. Complex conversations about adopting of cats and what the baby cats were like and what's for lunch and can you go get me this and what, where my house is and all this stuff. And I would then go the next day to a supermarket in the city and someone would say something to me in the supermarket, but they'd speak at me like a machine gun. Just words, just abstract words, just sound. Ba 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 ba, wah 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 wah. And I would go, what? No understanding whatsoever. And it was my first understanding that words and the symbols and the human tropes that we hold on to are at best our last line of defense in effective communication. And that if we can embody what we have to say, then there's so much understanding there. And if I can do that with human being, what could happen with a horse? Have you ever been with someone and they're speaking at you in English and you just have this unsettling feeling in your pit of your stomach? And then weeks, months, years later, even you discover how they really felt and thought about you.
Mm-hmm.
They'd never said it to you directly, but you felt it.
Right.
Mm.
And I think that this is where, I think they've done studies on this and it's like 90% of communication is nonverbal, actually.
Right.
Body language and expression and all the things that you just named with your Polish friend.
But I think a lot of us have forgotten the nonverbals.
Absolutely. And I think particularly because we do this thing on the computer screen.
Right.
And like I am a disembodied head for most of my work life.
Right.
We forget that the body holds so much wisdom, that the body is like, just to circle it back to what I was saying at the very beginning, is like, that's where our intuition lives. Like to me, I look back on, I'll use the example with the trainer that I was telling you about, who was working out of my barn over the winter. There were a couple of times where I was like, oh, that kind of sits funny. Well, I kind of don't like the way that she treated her horse, but it's her horse. I can't really say anything about how she treats her own horse. She doesn't seem like she's got great time management. It seems like, there's
the business coach stepping up, wanting to step in and assist. Yes. Mm-hmm.
And it all came to a head where I went away for a week, and part of the arrangement of her being able to work out of my barn was she was to take care of our animals. And it was the coldest part of the winter. I was away for a corporate offsite that I was facilitating. And it was the coldest part of winter in January, and she didn't water them once while I was away.
Sorry?
She did not give them water.
What?
My neighbor had to, thank God I have wonderful neighbors. She messaged me and said, hey, has she given you communication that she's been out to go take care of your horses? Because I don't see tire tracks out to your barn.
What?
And when my neighbor got into the barn, there was no water.
There is a special place in hell. There is a special seat in hell, or at least in limbo, waiting for these personality types who are unscrupulous, who are dishonest, who are cruel to the bone, And it has been my experience that the horse industry, for some reason, tends to attract a disproportionate number of these personality profiles. And if you're in the game long enough, and if you're smart enough, you develop a nose for them like a bloodhound. You can snip them out and learn how to take a hard left when you see them coming, because they're everywhere.
And I mean, I have a little bit of that muscle from, the industry that I worked in was, I was an acupuncturist, and I was a fertility acupuncturist who worked with a lot of clients who were going through like IVF and fertility treatments. And so I was in close contact with a lot of doctors. And I learned to stop looking at people's credentials. And lean into how I feel when I'm in the presence. I don't care how credentialed, how many papers and diplomas and all that stuff that you have on your wall. If you are not embodied, again, to go back to what Shannon's wisdom is like, you have to be a safe person.
Yes.
And, this woman advertises herself as a natural horsemanship trainer. And this is where I think that this is why I'm grateful that I got into horses late, is because I've had this one experience with this one person. And I'm like, oh, the same stuff that applies in my past life working in the medical industry applies here too. I can't just take someone at their word who says I'm a natural horsemanship trainer,
right,
and trust that their definition of what that means is the same definition of what I mean. And so I am very, very discerning about who I learn from. It comes to my own work around personal development and business practices and understanding the nervous system and understanding trauma, because that is like an intricately woven part of my work, but also when it comes to horses. And honestly, I've got my people, you being one of them.
Thank you. It's an honor.
I don't need anybody else.
For now, it's an honor. It's an honor to support you. And what you're speaking to is actually a blueprint that other people can follow of be an adult, be honest, call a thing. If someone is not pulling their weight, upholding their side of the bargain, or is being unscrupulous and inappropriate with you, your money, your horses, your resources, fire them, because there are so many professionals out there to choose from these days. So many that I often hear folks complain that they're overwhelmed by choice. Great. If we're overwhelmed by choice, then make choices, including firing ones that are doing it wrong. We've got to start moving in that direction. We've got to start voting with our feet, because these people will never change their practices if we don't hit them where it hurts, and that's in their pocket. I felt myself. I'll say one thing that upsets one person and I'll lose business for it. I've had colleagues who purported to support my work cancel clinic tickets because I wrote about clicker training with, concerns.
Yeah.
And when that happened, it was always instrumental for me to go, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Because I now believe you when you tell me who you say you are, that I'm not in a safe environment to disagree with you.
Yeah.
Right? And everyone's on their own journey. Maybe they were dealing with other things that they needed to deal with, but it's so encouraging for me to see a horse person like you, regardless whether you ever. Let's take a break. Speaking of spiritual businesses and spiritual business mentoring, I consider myself a small business. You might think I'm not. You might think I'm something else. But when it comes down to it, this is my business. This is how I make a living. This is my full-time job. My full-time job for the last few years has been a extremely high volume lesson operation, but my lessons were just conducted online rather than in person, mostly. If you'd like to come and join me and be at the forefront of learning about horses online in a most modern way and progressive way, in a way which frees you to choose exactly how you want to train your horse. You're no longer pursuant to the local professionals available. You can study with anyone, anywhere. I try to make this as easy as possible for you. I even have a 24/7 booking concierge in my administrator who will meet with you for free for up to 15 minutes, 20 minutes to help you troubleshoot your tech woes. If you'd like to come and join us, I'm really interested in trying to make learning as accessible as possible to you. And I've got so many things available for you to do that. The easiest way to do that is to go to emotionalhorsemanship.com and consider signing up for the Emotional Horsemanship Foundation online course. This foundation online course is step 1 of many steps that you might be invited or led to take if you wish to come and learn with me and with your horses. Thank you for being here. And now we shall return to my conversation with my friend Cat Ho Soo Lee. I now believe you when you tell me who you say you are, that I'm not in a safe environment to disagree with you.
Yeah.
Right? And everyone's on their own journey. Maybe they were dealing with other things that they needed to deal with, but it's so encouraging for me to see a horse person like you, regardless whether you ever spent money in my business or not. It's encouraging for me to see you because you represent what I believe is the new wave of horse person that I want to help usher in. Ones who step in as adults because they love horses and they're interested in it. And when bullshit presents itself, they go, oh, no, bye, out. Rather than feeling like, oh, I know nothing. Maybe they didn't give the horses water in winter because they're the experts. And so I'll just nod my head and fawn. Right?
I want to circle back to something that you said, which feels really, really important to name, which is you always have a choice.
Mm-hmm.
Always, always, always have a choice.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm new to this area. I just moved to Spokane, Washington about a year and a half ago. And I would say that a lot of the people here are more of like traditional horse people. Like there's a lot of barrel racing. There's a lot of like Western stuff and dressage stuff and, kind of what you would think of in terms of the horse world. The first I'm going to cry talking about this just because it's been such a journey. So one of my horses, Winnie, is traumatized and was abused before she came here. I've known her for about 2 years now, and her feet were horrendous when I got her. Her feet were horrendous when I met her. I leased her for about a year, and for a lot of different reasons, that person, didn't have her feet clipped. She had her feet clipped once when she was with her previous owner, and I had somebody who was an acquaintance of that trainer I was telling you about come out to clip my horse's feet, and he tried to clip Winnie's feet, and her being a very sensitive, traumatized, abused horse kicked at him, and he said, no, I'm not doing her. And
fair enough for both of them. Fair enough to him.
Yeah.
And fair enough to Winnie.
Yeah. And I was like, I don't know. Like, Winnie's feet look like slippers. And even though I've taken your hoof care class, it's not something that I feel like I can really handle on
Mhm.
my own.
Mhm.
Uh, And I was like, I don't know how I'm going to take care of this horse. Like she needs her feet clipped. It's just like it's horrible.
Mm.
Yesterday, I had a farrier come out. I had met him 6 weeks ago. He came out for a consultation. He spent 45 minutes just getting to know my horses 6 weeks ago and gave me some pointers on um, things that I can do to make their appointment easier. He I don't know what it is about farriers. I've met several farriers and they don't seem like they like horses. Like,
Can I explain?
sure.
I spent a period of time trimming horses for the public in southern Spain mostly. So all the feet were rock hard. And because I am a trainer as well, and because of the nature of what I do, I became almost overnight known for being good with the horses and developing a good trim. So I was new to that service, but people started having me out because there's a lot of horses in that area, a lot of expats in the area. They're all looking for a trimmer. Everyone can't find a trimmer, and not everyone needed a trainer. At that time, my business was a local service business. I had very little international presence, and so it was basically hoof care that paid my bills from 2019 until the end of 2020. Basically, got me through COVID. That and trekking in the mountains and working at the trekking centers got me through. So try trimming Winnie yourself, and we'll circle back. And you'll go, oh, I have a whole other level of appreciation for people who have to do this for a living. It's a demanding job. It's egregiously dangerous. It's incredibly frustrating because if I understood it, that I was being paid as a hoof care provider, but they were getting a twofer. They were getting a 2-for-1. They were getting training and trimming at the same time. And the longest I ever took to finish a horse who really had trouble was about 2 hours to finish a trim in the sun, in the heat, and took home €40 for 2 hours work. Back aching, hands bleeding, tools blunt, car needing repair, €40, 2 hours work. Thanks very much. I'll see you again in 4 weeks. Then I looked at the books and went, oh, this isn't sustainable at all, because the distance I was driving, I was like, I would have to trim 10 horses a day at this price in order to make it viable. And if I'm trimming horses with these problems, I can't do 10 a day. Also, my body can't take 10 a day. What can I take? So I said, look, if your horse is taking longer than 45 minutes to be trimmed, it's no longer a standard trim. It's now a trimming plus horsemanship. This is not a 2-for-1. So I will start charging an hourly rate for their training as well as their trimming. I think this is a fair appropriation of the workload. And overnight, all those owners of all those difficult horses evaporated. Overnight, ditched me in favor of a hoof care provider who could do a 10-minute trim. It wasn't a detailed job. It wasn't a specific job. They were very skilled, but it was a 10-minute trim. It was like nip, 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 rasp, rasp, next hoof, nip, 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 rasp, rasp, next hoof. Just like a chicken nugget factory, just hoof, 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 hoof. And we need those hoof care providers as well. But people who are looking for a bit more care, a bit more tenderness, I had to start charging for it, and they all evaporated except for one. And that one is still a friend of mine, dear friend of mine. We, in fact, moved across the country to the same region together. We relocated together. I lived on her farm. She sent me her worker when she didn't need her worker anymore. Her worker now takes care of my horses. I've trained that worker how to trim. We were trimming today, in fact. So farriers don't like horses. They probably did.
Yeah.
but it's pretty crap out there. I remember getting thrown up against a stable wall, body slammed by a 4-year-old Lusitano because I had touched his shoulder, and his owner was sitting on the floor scrolling on her phone while this was happening. Wasn't even holding the horse, wasn't attempting to manage the situation, wasn't. And this is normal. Meanwhile, I was getting body slammed when I had a hoof between my legs and a sharp implement in my hand.
Mhm.
Do that, 10 horses a day minimum. Some do up to 30, 40 horses a day or more, 6 days a week for decades. Do that, and let's see if we still like horses. By the way, their backs are all shot by the time they're 50. It's a horrible job. It's one of the worst. It's one of the worst and most underpaid, and it is so unusual to find clients who don't scrim and scrounge them on prices, fuck around with trim cycles, play games with their horse's soundness by extending the trim cycles and then leaning over the shoulder and saying, you didn't do that right. I mean, it can be just an awful place to be as a professional. It is so awful that I just very gently backpedaled out of that field, found myself just teaching people how to trim. This year is the first year my business is flying without that arm of my business at all. I've got a self-study course there. That is all. I will not consult. I will not coach anymore because it is that bad as a service provider. It is that bad. I've had people come to me after they've purchased a course called Barefoot Basics and ask why there wasn't more advanced information in the course. Because it's called Barefoot Basics. And then I'm the asshole for saying that. So this is the psychological demographic we're dealing with when you go into that role. When you're a hoof care provider, you are the everyone's lawnmower, right? You're the local guy, right? And there's a certain level of something in terms of the tidal wave of humanity that you have to deal with when you're there. It's harder to niche yourself unless you're in one of these equestrian cities like Aiken, South Carolina. Everyone's got a horse ranch, or Gilroy in California. Everyone's got 5-10 acres and horses, right? And it's as far as the eye can see. Unless you're in one of these oversaturated communities, you're the local service provider and you've got to deal with whoever's there, and it can be wild.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that context, because again, like, not really knowing that much about the horse world, I'm thinking like farriers are like the grumpiest people I know.
Yep.
Like,
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. And listen, it is so dangerous what they have to do. And if you've got a remedial horse, I say this not just for you, Kat, but anyone listening, if you've got a remedial horse who's tricky with their legs and their feet, tell your trimmer and offer to pay them extra for their time, to take the time, or ask them if they have a trainer who can come with them, or ask them if they have a vet they can work with to help you sedate if you believe that that is appropriate for your case. But you don't throw remedial behavioral horses at trimmers who are trimming for their job, because they're a trimmer. They're not a trainer. It's not their job to train these animals. It's their job to trim the feet, and they can't trim or shoe the horse properly. If they're dealing with these behavioral problems, they have to be able to do their job, and we need to treat them accordingly. I've got a very hard boundary on that.
yeah. But again, like, I think the thing I wanted to sort of illustrate here is that, like, we always have choice, which is, I love my farrier. Yesterday was the first time he did an actual trim on my horses.
How did it go?
He prepared me, because he came in 6 weeks before that, and we did a consult. He stayed with me for 45 minutes, just meeting my horse around him. And he gave me lots of really, really good pointers in terms of like, how do I get these horses, which 6 weeks ago, none of them would be able to pick up their feet.
Right.
How do I get these horses to a place where they're going to be safe?
Nice.
And it's like, we can't always ask, and I think I'm sort of like, both sides, is how do we keep each other safe? Like, it's an investment for him to come in and do a consult because now I know how I can be the best client that I can be.
Right.
You know,
Right.
he came in, we did a little bit of sedation for Winnie. She was walking on the backs of her heels. Like, she wasn't even walking on her hooves yesterday. And now we've got all 4 feet underneath her. She's a little sore today. I cried while he was trimming her, because it's been something that the moment I met her, I was like, this poor animal, she can't even move right. How is she supposed to like feel comfortable in her body and feel like she can trust people? It took me 6 months to be able to even touch her. And I'm sitting here watching this creature get trimmed and finally getting the care that she really deserves. And anyone who's listening to this, if you're in the Spokane area, call up Brett Hawkins. You can DM me.
Sounds like he knows what he's doing. Sounds like he knows what he's doing.
Comes out with his dog.
Oh.
It's this lovely little family business. They both love horses. Like, to me, it's like that intuition again. I feel comfortable around these people. So then my horses feel comfortable around them. We got everybody trimmed up yesterday. Everyone's happy. I feel so passionately about, and again, this is where like sort of our overlap is like, as a service provider, you are allowed to say, these are the kinds of people that I want to attract.
Right.
This is the level of business that I need out of my clients. Like, responsibility that I require of my clients. That way you aren't burdening the entire responsibility of, whether it is a hoof care client or any other, niche that you're in. And then also, as clients, you're allowed to have choice. Thank God there are trainers like you and Shannon and another woman that I am working with, Amy. Her Instagram page is Pure Horse Montana. Like, these are the 3 people that are like, I will pay attention to and listen to, because I see how my body feels in your presence. That is the biggest indicator for me in terms of how I choose out of this like sea of equestrian providers. Like, does your body feel safe around that person? If no, trust your body, listen to your body.
Yep. And I've had folks come through my door whom I recognize weren't a good fit for me. And I believe it's also the service provider's responsibility to communicate that when they're not a good fit. When I was trimming for the public, which it's interesting that this has come up in our conversation, but when I was trimming for the public, I never not had appointments where I wasn't explaining with the client about what I was doing with the feet, why I was doing it that way. And they were all surprised and sometimes a little cross-eyed that I was taking the time to explain to them and educate them as I was trimming and showing them, this is, what I'm doing here, and this is why I'm doing it here. And then you put the foot back down, see the result here. They were always surprised because they were so used to the head down, bum up farrier who just grunts and says, next hoof, please. Right. And so your hoof care provider, don't know him personally. He's no dummy knowing that he's going to trim for you, because you're speaking for yourself and you sound like the right kind of client for someone to trim for, because he came out, he consulted with you, he gave you tips about management, behavior, handling, etc., to set him and you and the horses up for the appointment later. So this isn't his first rodeo. He knows that if he's going to onboard someone in his business, consult, advise, educate, circle back when they're ready. And I guarantee you yesterday, I mean, I don't know for sure, maybe I could be completely off base, but I'd be pretty confident to say that yesterday, as much as you were testing him out, he was testing you out. Did she do it? Did she handle them? And if you hadn't, there would have been a conversation at some point where you would have been disintegrated from his business and he would have moved on. Like, I know that there are farrier groups on Facebook where farriers in certain areas create blacklists for people that they shouldn't, that no farrier there should go to because someone's had, 6 months worth of bills not paid or crazy things go on in these environments, And so I think it's important that service providers, if they are to be themselves, that they like what they're doing. And I'll be real, I never loved trimming. I love the results. I never loved trimming. I'm tall. I got long legs. It's hard for me unless the horses are tall, right? And all the horses in Spain were these little short motherfuckers. And there I was kind of crouched up underneath them. When I first trimmed my 17-hand Sereno, it was delightful for my body because I could just work at my height. I never liked trimming. I did it because I needed to pay the bills because no one was taking emotional horsemanship seriously.
Yeah.
And that's changed. So, yeah.
Makes me so sad to think that farriers are not valued.
Mm-hmm. Not valued at all. But valued as well. They say they love, but they don't walk the talk.
But it's like the schedule that I'm on is 6 weeks. And I have somebody who is incredibly knowledgeable about horses coming out to talk to me about my horse's health every 6 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's fucking gold.
Right.
I help out because my neighbors and I, we sort of do horse care together. So like when the vet comes out, we do that together.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Farrier together. And I went over there to help them out, and he was able to spot like, hey, this horse, you might want to call in a vet for this because it's like right on the edge of laminitis. And then this horse, they live in a slightly different environment. I've got an indoor arena. They don't. This horse has some thrush. And so like, you're going to want to treat that. And so it's like these are a second set of incredibly valuable eyes on your animal.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how would you not value them in that way? Like, it's just mind-boggling to me. Like,
it is mind-boggling. It is mind-boggling to me too. And I always try to treat my service providers with respect. I always offer them a coffee. I always make sure that they're comfortable. I always make sure the horses are clean and they have everything they need. But I don't understand it. And it was a very disillusioning process for me. However, there were a few clients that I held on to with trimming that I held on to 12 to 18 months longer than I should have. I mean, I was getting really busy with emotional horsemanship, but I kept going every 3.5 to 5 weeks to trim for them because they treated me well. They always took my advice. If there was a handling problem, I would always leave them with a protocol to follow. They always followed the protocol. I'd show up next time the horse was better. If I asked them to soak the feet before trimming, because it was a rock hard draft horse or something, they always did. Like that, they always never run me around on prices. They never bullshitted me or nothing. And I just kept going back to them because I wanted to help them and I liked them. But there did come a point where it's like, I can't keep doing this anymore. It's really, really tough out there. Like the worst experiences I've had as an equestrian service provider have been as a hoof care provider, not as a trainer.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Treat your trimmers well, everyone.
Yeah.
Treat them well.
If you're in Spokane, and I'll give you Brett's number because he's amazing.
There we go. Well, I'm going to start rounding out our conversation, and there are these 3 little questions or segments I like to take us through just to round out the conversation. And I'd love to hear your not beginner take on them. Your advanced beginner take on them. Advanced in the sense of advanced human being coming into horsemanship. In my opinion. I'm going
to receive that. It's uncomfortable to receive.
I know. I have a very complicated relationship to compliments too. Because, yeah, I love what you're doing with your horses and your business as well. But if there was one thing in the equestrian industry from your perspective that you would like to muck out steaming pile of crap in the corner that just needs to be shoveled up, scooped out. I'm inviting you to get mucky with me. Let's muck something out together. What would that be?
I feel like this could be a whole other podcast episode.
Right.
But as somebody who has been asked to perform things that have felt really uncomfortable to me, I was a violinist when I was younger. I was the stereotypical good Korean girl who brought home good grades, did all the things that people asked me to do. I would like us to stop projecting those expectations onto horses. I would like for there to be a conversation around hey, what is it that you want to do? I look at my two boys, their personalities are so different. I would love to have an endurance horse one day. If it doesn't happen, I will love them regardless. They're not going anywhere. They're with me forever. And I just see this changing of hands with horses where it's oh, this one doesn't work for me, so I'm going to get rid of it. And this constant sort of merry-go-round without care for the emotional safety and well-being of these animals. Think about how disorienting it is. These horses are meant to stay with their herd for life. And we're switching them out 6, 7, 8, 9 different herds in their lifetime. And we expect them to keep us safe while we're riding them. It's unbelievable to me that that's the expectation. So that's a mucking.
I'll muck that out with you. I'll muck that out with you with one caveat. The caveat is that if someone recognizes that they are causing more problems with a horse and they have a very confident rehoming situation where they know that horse is going to be good, rehome that animal. I just had that happen inside my inner circle community. I had a dear client who, in a nutshell, discovered that though they loved their horse, that there was aspects to being a horse owner which were inappropriate for them, and that they didn't want to be a horse mum anymore. At their stage in life, they wanted to be free. There was also some aspects of it tied to a personal storyline that were triggering, being tied to the responsibility of a horse, and decided they didn't want to be a horse mum anymore. And immediately reached out to one of my other students, because I'm blessed to have an inner circle community right now with my students that are becoming this amazing supportive crew with each other. It's I without me there most of the time, thank God. This person reached out to one of my other students and said, would you take my horse? And sold their horse to them for $1, shipped that horse across the states for them. And that horse is now in Washington State, actually. You will meet their owner at the Gig Harbor Clinic. They're coming with one of their other horses to the clinic. But they rehomed within the student body, and the rehoming is absolutely successful. Perfect home. Even though the previous owner was also friggin' amazing, this next home is even better, and the horse is even better than they were before. And it's an example of rehoming done right. It's rare. But if someone discovers that they shouldn't be a horse person, or they shouldn't have this kind of horse for them, and they need to move on, I think they should move on. Not everyone is a professional with horses or has an advanced nervous system skill set such as yourself, where they can augment themselves for the animal. A lot of people can only be themselves. They can only lock into one shape of themselves. And therefore, they do have to shop around for that puzzle piece that slots in with them. And that they should be allowed that. They should be allowed that. But I do agree with you that the revolving door merry-go-round of this one's broken, I don't want it anymore, that needs to stop.
And something that I think that I love about what you just shared is that through your work, I imagine she's in your inner circle, your community.
Mm-hmm.
She was able to peel off those layers to say, hey, this
Mm-hmm.
isn't
For me. Yeah.
it's one of the things that I love about like some of my like favorite quote unquote success stories are the people who come in to work with me as, you know, a lot of my clients are wanting to build a business online, wanting to do the coaching thing, and they come in and work with me, and because so much of my work is based around, hey, like what do you want to do? Like what is your purpose in life? And sometimes they decide, hey, this isn't for me.
Right.
You know, and they end up, I have one woman who's like, I'm going to be a pop star and has started singing and writing songs and, you know, doing open mic nights in Los Angeles and, you know, has actually recorded several songs. Like, she's like, that's what I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
I have people who have decided that they wanted to go back into the corporate world. I have people who have decided that they wanted to um, go back to school. And like, I think that when we approach things from a less behavioral sort of standpoint, and this is the template you're supposed to follow, which is how you work as well. And it's more about like, what is most right and most aligned for you? And we work from that energetic space.
Yes.
Then
Yes.
it opens up so many nuanced possibilities,
Mm-hmm.
including, hey, I might need to walk away from this horse.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
don't mean to create any sort of shame for people who do need to rehome their horses. It's the energy of rehoming a horse because it is best for that horse, or, you know, like you were saying, some people may not have a nuanced enough nervous system or flexible enough nervous system that they can sort of amend themselves. But it's the throwaway culture that I think is part of the like capitalism hellscape thing.
Mm-hmm.
And horses are under that sort of umbrella of this is an item I can just get rid of.
Yep. It's like next season, H&M is going to have horses on a rack, like fast fashion, fast horses, just like this revolving door. Oh, this year, this morphology is in. This year, rollcore is in. No, rollcore is so 5 years ago. Okay, now we're doing hyperextension. Great. You know, like it's this revolving door of, you know, fast results, fast extractivism, you know, rapid escalation. That is just a game I'm never ever going to play. Not interested in playing that game. Not interested in. I'm not even interested in playing that game so that I can prove that I can, so that I can step back from it and talk about it and say, well, I did that, so I can talk about it in the way that I don't want to. I'm not even interested in building the credibility that I can do that. I'm not even interested in that at all. I have another client I'm just going to share here in terms of circling back to what you said earlier about choice and what do you want to do? She's been with me for over 2 years and she's got these two horses, a little bit older horses, whom one was in a Western system, working under a lot of pressure, has osteopathic changes, pretty messed up. And the other one was from an eventing tradition, also overfaced, aggression issues, hormonal dysregulation, health issues, etc., etc., etc. Took on these two horses thinking, oh, I'm going to have these two nice horses I can ride, have fun, do all the things. Little did she know, she's embarked on this multi-year journey of rehabilitating them back to mental, physical, and emotional health. And in the end, she's left with these two slightly older horses that have been chewed up and spat out and who are tired in their nervous system. Not done. They're not done. They're just tired and jaded in their own way. And together, we have both coached her so that she feels like she can be this kind of horse person and that that's valid and okay. but also brought her horses to a level of self-actualization. And their sessions look something like this. She arrives, she lets them into the arena, and her horses go, great, she's here, wonderful. They lay down and they go to REM sleep. REM sleep. REM sleep. So I've had lessons where they both just go plop and she sits in between them and their eyes flutter and they're running in their sleep. And then one will get up and shake itself off and look at her and say, what are we doing today? And she'll do a little postural adjustment with them. And they say, that's very nice, very civilized. And then she'll pop a bareback pat on one and kind of dink around the arena for 15 minutes. And the horse goes, okay, that was great. That's enough now. That's enough now. And she get off again and she says, I love you. And they say, we love you too. And then they just kind of hang out. And it's just delightful. It's just nobody's business but our own. We're not trying to prove a point. We're trying to create an appropriate horsemanship practice for these beings that works for them, that feels good to them, and decondition the client who's laboring under years of being told, you know nothing, you're not good enough, you need to be being like us. Deconditioning that, letting her know, hey, you have two horses that have been chewed up and spat out who attack people, and they feel safe to go to REM sleep only when you're there and then get up and take you for a ride. Do you understand that that's a big deal? And they're kind of like, oh, yeah, I guess that is kind of a big deal. Cool. And they're like, this is who I am as a horse person. This is how I get to define myself. I'm like, yeah, you get to define yourself in this abandoning of the late stage capitalist hellscape. We get to define ourselves. And if you want it to be a pajama party, it can be a pajama party if that's what you want.
I mean, my brain goes to this curiosity around this woman's story as well, because I think that, you know, our horses are amazing mirrors for our own stories. So I wonder about how she has been asked to perform and how she's actually, you know, tired.
There's a whole story there. There's been a lot to unpack there. They will know that I'm speaking about them when they hear this recording. Love them. I might even have them on the pod one day to share their story. They're great. Love them.
It's like, I look at Koko, because he's the one that I've been talking about so much in this episode. I did not grow up being encouraged to play, being told it was okay to play. In fact, play felt really dangerous to me because if I got hurt, it was not okay for my mom. There's a bit of an enmeshment story there. But also, if my brother got hurt, I would get in trouble for not keeping an eye on him. And so I not only stopped myself from playing, but I stopped my brother from playing because it was like, dangerous. And punishment was not great. And Koko is the most playful creature. Like, I bring in stuffies and he's like walking around and flopping stuffies around, and he pulls the gloves out of my back pocket, and if I have a hat on, he has to pull it off and run around with it. And like there's just something about play and how he is such a beautiful teacher for me in mirroring that. And so I look at these like horse human relationships and I'm like,
are you having fun up there?
They're no different.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Like,
yes, they're so much like us. One thing I can recommend for Koko is if you get a great big cardboard box, take it, chuck it in the arena, and let him just have at it. He will, like a cat, he'll either be afraid of it or he'll be like, let me destroy that. And it'll be so good for his mental and emotional development to have something to put his mouth on, to manipulate, to control, to jump on and like smash and bash and crack. If he's taking your gloves and your hat, and get a box, let him destroy it. At the very least, it might stop him from like getting big enough that he'll start ramming your fences or destroying gates or stuff like that, because that's probably in your future as well. Okay, I want to move on to segment number 2. That was a beautiful muck it out, by the way. Very, very good. Segment number 2 is, how are you contributing to the tides of change that are sweeping the horse world right now? As an owner new to horses, who is a spiritual business mentor, and bringing that lens into your work with horses, as a student of one of my favorite probably my favorite horse trainer in the world, Shannon, as you, as Cat, how do you see you contributing to the tide of change?
Well, the basis of my work revolves around the nervous system. It always has. And so I hope that we can start having conversations about horse nervous systems.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a horse specific Instagram account, but I post about my horses all the time on Instagram. And and I get so many non-horse people who just are stoked to see, because they've not had relationships with horses. Like I posted about Koko and Forrest playing with a little like carrot stuffy the other day, and like my DMs are now like, oh my god, I didn't know horses like wanted toys, like this is crazy.
Mm-hmm,
And just like letting people know that like horses are not just this like fancy thing that is meant to around a ring under someone's control. It's like no, like let's have a relationship with these beings who like actually, having these 4 horses like has made me realize how deeply they want to connect with us. And I'm just amazed that, like, I do believe in generational and ancestral trauma. I do believe that they are holding some of that in their DNA. Despite all that, they still want to connect with.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's amazing, and it's humbling. I agree with you about the epigenetic factor. Horses who've witnessed generation upon generation of things happen to them, and yet they still want to connect with us. It's there's something in there that makes me weak at the knees. I have a friend and also client who runs a rescue and charity, a sanctuary in France, and shared with me the other day that her grandfather was a horse butcher, ran a horse abattoir, and her father mistreated and neglected and abused his horses all his life. And she says, I feel like I have many reparations to make. And so I'm running a sanctuary in France, I believe with inheritance from her late father, who did all the things. She took that and said, I'm going to make this right. I'm going to make it right. And I looked back. I'm from a horse line only 1 generation or 2 generations removed from Australia. I have a great grandfather on my mum's side who made a liniment for racehorses in Queensland, and he wrote about racehorses and owned racehorses. And I believe on my dad's side, my grandmother, so my dad's mother, I believe her father or grandfather ran carriage horses in Melbourne in the 1800s, so 19th century. So there's horse people in my family, working horse people in my family. And I think that's part of the reason why it's come easy to me, because I have ancestors who've come before me who put in a lot of the hard work. Easier to me, I think. Anyway. Yeah. And finally, Kat, we're in an age of learning journeys, and that's good. Absolutely. Learning journeys are good. They're essential. However, it's only a journey if we come home at some point, or it's not a journey anymore. It's displacement. It's homelessness. And I see a lot of horse people because perhaps they've had someone shake their finger at them and say, you know nothing. They've gone on these learning journeys that have displaced their sense of center, their sense of self, a sense of comfort, a sense of clear navigation. They've displaced a sense of the ability to make discerning choices, the ability to pick a trainer and go with them, the ability to know what's a yes and what's a no for them in favor of, well, I'm just on a learning journey forever now. We're in an age now where I think we need to start calling it home. So what's home for you, Cat Lee?
Mm. This conversation has felt incredibly clarifying for me.
Hmm.
And I thank you for that reflection, because what I'm realizing in this moment is that I am home. I think I am different from some of the folks who have come into your world in which they've had to find a home within the horse world that didn't always exist. And so you've created that home for them. I think I feel the most whole that I've felt in my whole life. There, as you were saying earlier, like I'm the same person when I'm with my husband as when I'm with my horses, as when I'm with clients, with my friends. Like there is no more masking anymore in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's from this place of wholeness and homeness that I feel like I can provide a safe space for my horses.
Got it.
So
You are home. I love that. And that is true for everything you've said with me today. And it's explained for me why, as a relative beginner to horses, I'm sitting here in my office watching you handle your colts going, I'm thinking, I didn't say this out loud, but I was thinking in my head, how is she not several decades in on her practice? How? I'm not trying to give you a big head or blow you up about it, because, and it wasn't even about my teachings, it was that you had an advanced feel skill set with your horses straight away. And it was like, you looked, behaved, and had all the earmarks, in my opinion, of a horse person who was several decades in on a practice. So when I ask you the question, what's home for you? You just said, I am home. I'm like, well, bingo right there. That's kind of the point. That's the paradox of it. Like home is not something you look for. That's the paradox of home, because looking for it is a learning journey. That's a journey. It's the Wizard of Oz all over again. She goes on a journey to come home, right? Meanwhile, the bitch fairy at the end just says, you had the thing on your feet the whole time, like egg on the face moment, right? And then she immediately goes home, right? And so many people, their answers are right in them already.
mm,
Your gifts, your talents, Cat, are yours. They don't belong to your family. They don't belong to your horses. They don't belong to your work. They don't belong to your professional identity or even your personal identity. They transcend something, and you can apply them to anything
mm.
you want. I'm really excited to see where your future goes as a horse owner. Buckle up. That's all I'm saying. We'll talk when I'm in your state. We'll talk, but buckle up, because I have a feeling a lot of the people who listen to me, who are business owners, might benefit from reaching out to you.
I mean, I definitely welcome that. Um, I think if there's any like one skill that anybody can like invest into that has like ROI over and over and over again, is learning how to have a flexible nervous system.
Mm.
Because that's all this is
Mm-hmm.
like, with your business, how can you be flexible with the ebbs and the flows?
Right.
Human relationships. And to me, like I'm so excited to be at the very beginning of this journey. I'm 4 months into owning horses. I'm at the
Mm.
very beginning of this journey of like, oh, here's another way my nervous system gets to play.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is the only way you can, well, I shouldn't say only. It is a very reliable path home, is when you can feel at home in your own regulated nervous system. and understand what it means to like fully just be okay and accept yourself and everyone else around you.
There you go.
So
It's
thank you so
beautiful.
much for
It's
this
my
moment.
pleasure. It's my pleasure. And you also just answered the first question I asked today, which is, who are you? You just answered that. You just answered that you have a sense of yourself. And it's like, does a fish know it's wet? Does the Pope know he's Catholic? Does Cat know she's Cat? Of course you're Cat. You're just yourself, right? You're not disassociated. It's beautiful. I hope that anyone listening who has felt disembodied or disoriented in themselves, or is stepping into the equestrian world or has been in it for a while, and all you meet is voices telling you, you don't know enough, you're not good enough, that there is a pathway home, and it has more to do with going inside than it does about going outside. And Kat, you embodied that, in my opinion, tremendously well. So thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me on. And it's odd for me to be in the interviewee seat. So
Right.
feels cozy doing it with you. So I appreciate you holding the space and asking the questions and being curious and reflecting back in ways that I think every conversation that you and I have had, I feel incredibly seen, Lucky.
Thank you.
Whether on the podcast, on my podcast, or in our client calls, where I feel very seen.
Yeah,
So
I just like you. I'm picking up. I'm picking up what you're putting down. I'm not afraid to be unprofessional and make a personal statement like that. I just like you. I think you're cool. You know. So yeah, it's basically my way of saying, you want to be my friend. You know, when you're in primary school and you walked up, I loved it. When I was in kindergarten, this is how I made friends. I found someone that I felt, drawn to, and I'd walk up to them and I'd say, do you want to be my friend? And they would say, sure. And we'd go off playing together. And it's kind of like trying to do that now as an adult is strangely difficult, but also hugely rewarding at the same time.
So I'm glad that we're friends, Lucky.
Cool.
I'm really excited that I get to
see you soon.
You
yeah, I'll see you soon. Very, very soon, in about a month or so. All right. Thanks for joining me. You've been listening to the Emotional Horsemanship Podcast. That was my guest, Cat Ho Soo Lee, and I am your host, Lockie Phillips. If you're enjoying the Emotional Horsemanship Podcast, please consider following and downloading episodes. Please also leave us a review on your podcast platform if you can. And if you'd like to consider supporting this work and this podcast in the future, please consider going to emotionalhorsemanship.com and signing up for some of the offers that are there. We can take you in a much deeper way towards the heart of the matter with your horse. And all you have to do is follow the prompts that are in the show notes below. Thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting the podcast. And I hope this was an interesting conversation for you. See you soon.